There are many, many views on Genesis 1, and I think we need to figure out what some of those might be.
As a newbie, straight away, I question science versus Christianity.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Interesting. Are
Yeah.
you questioning the two as two separate things? Like,
I was actually telling Alyssa about this, that recently I went to a National History Museum and I was standing looking at the timeline of dinosaurs. And in my head, I was thinking, like, I was so confused with timelines. Like, part of me was like, did God create the dinosaurs? Like, I was just so confused with the whole how everything worked. Because in my head, I was like, dinosaurs had to live on Earth with trees and land and water separated. Like, so I think it's all just very confusing. And then obviously the Big Bang that you learn about at school, or yeah, I don't know. I'm still confused about it.
Yeah.
I still don't really think I have a set answer. But if God created everything, who created the dinosaurs?
oh, I mean,
God,
yeah,
they're part of everything.
But they were before that. So
Well, that's probably a bigger question then, isn't it? It's a matter of timing. I think every Christian,
yeah.
regardless of your view on Genesis 1, would affirm that God created everything. So therefore, it comes down to a matter of timing.
So to sort of touch on what you were saying about science and religion, and this is purely my own opinion, I'm not forcing it on anyone else, but my thought process is science and religion aren't actually against each other. They work in tandem. One explains one version of it, the other tries to explain it in just a different way. Those two sort of work together. If we look at the Big Bang Theory, it's an explosion or an expansion of matter that started the universe. Well, what happens when there's an explosion or energy that starts from a singularity and expands extremely quickly? Well, light gets created. And what do we see here? We see light being created. So for me, the two aren't against each other. One is just a way to explain the other in just a different form.
The common Christian way of phrasing that is that we have the book of scripture and the book of nature. And we read both together to get a full picture of the universe.
Yeah.
Is the common way that viewpoint is expressed.
And that's what I believe. I don't think like the science today disproves any of this, because if we look at the Big Bang Theory, for example, I can see the Big Bang in here.
So based on what you just said, I'm getting very much a viewpoint that is commonly called old Earth creationism. But I think before we discuss that, we should probably talk about young Earth creationism. So there are many viewpoints on Genesis 1. Probably the most famous is the young Earth view, which is based on the very straightforward idea that Genesis 1 is a step-by-step historical account of creation of the world, where each day represents a normal 24-hour period. Now, a really famous proponent of this was Ken Ham. So if you want more information, I guess look him up. A less famous believer of this was me as a child. Now, that's not, let me clarify so I don't annoy a whole bunch of our listeners. I'm not saying that this is a childish viewpoint. I'm just saying that as a fact, I believed this as a child, just so we're very clear from the outset. So yeah, a lot of Christians, it's particularly popular in America, I would say, based on the numbers I've seen, is that Genesis 1, literal, step by step. So everything else, like dinosaurs or other timelines or Big Bang, you need to figure out how it fits into Genesis 1 as a literal 7-day week. But ultimately, you just believe Genesis 1 and everything else must be false or must be interpreted differently. Now, there's a really easy way to make everything fit, and that is called mature creationism, which is just that God created the universe with the appearance of great age. So when God created stars, even though they're billions of light years away, he created the light in motion so that it's already hitting the earth. When God created trees, if you had cut down a tree on day 3, you would have found growth rings in it, even though it was a few hours old. And so because you can theoretically believe in this mature creationism idea, God could create everything in any order he wanted to with whatever appearance of age he wanted to. So you don't actually need science and Genesis 1 to agree on the age of things, because God can create anything looking like any age.
Like, they say it's this age. It's like, well, yes, it is that age because I made it that age.
Yes. Yeah, I made the tree 100 years old, even though it is one day old.
Mm.
But as God, he can do that.
Yeah.
Like, there's absolutely fair and true. Like, that is a popular interpretation of Genesis 1. Now, holders of this viewpoint will often argue that it is also the traditional viewpoint. In response to that, I'd like to point out that John Dixon says that from the earliest centuries, many of the great Jewish scholars, so Philo, Maimonides, and also some of the earliest Christian scholars, Clement, Ambrose, and Augustine, taught that the 6 days of creation were a literary device, not literal events. And so while this is popular in certain segments of Christianity, and while they will claim it's the traditional viewpoint, history doesn't actually show that. Now that we understand young earth creationism, we can move on to the view that I think Josh expressed before,
Yeah.
which is old earth creationism. Some famous people who believe this is Hugh Ross. So look up Hugh Ross if you want more information. Another less famous person is Lachlan as a teenager.
Lachlan is I like how you keep referring to yourself as less famous.
Well, I am a lot less famous. So old earth creationism is the idea that each day in Genesis 1 was not a 24-hour period, but instead represents a much longer period of time. And when you actually start thinking about it in that way, I will say that it lines up almost perfectly. And so let me read a quote from Edwin Bevan to prove this point. Supposing we could be transported backwards in time to different moments in the past of our planet, we should see it in its first condition, where there was no land distinguishable from the water and only a dim light coming from the sun through thick volumes of clouds. Sounds a lot like day 1. At a later moment, as the globe dried, land would have appeared. Sounds like day 2. Again, at a later moment, low forms of life, animal and vegetable, would have begun. Day 3. Sooner or later in the process, the clouds would have become so thin and broken that a creature standing on the earth would have seen above him for the first time the sun, the moon, and the stars. Day 4. At still a later moment, we would see the earth with its great primeval monsters. Day 5. And lastly, we should see the earth with its present fauna and flora and the final product of animal evolution, man. Sounds a lot like day 6. So when you stop and take each day of Genesis and turn it into a very long period of time, and then you make your viewpoint from the surface of the earth, the days and the science line up remarkably well.
Hmm.
Josh, is that a fair way of explaining what you currently think?
Yes, 100%. That's what I think. There's a good way of summarizing my thoughts on that. So you said that was what your teenage self thought. What about the not so famous present day?
The present day
of
Lachlan? So I think I currently subscribe to what is known as the literary view of Genesis 1. Now, some famous people for this is John Collins, not the singer, John Lennox, and then a less famous person, Lachlan John, as an adult. Yes, my middle name is John, so I totally fit in with the Johns who believe this. This viewpoint is that this creation story was never written as a historical account, but instead is the most beautiful piece of literature, incredibly poetic, and the primary purpose of it is to convey theological messages about God, which shaped and began the Jewish worldview. And I think as you read through Genesis 1, if you are not struck by the beauty of the poetry, if you're not struck by how much thought has clearly gone into this passage of structuring it and thinking deeply about every single word placement, like in the Hebrew, every word is placed in an incredibly beautiful, majestic way. I think this is the most beautiful piece of literature I've ever read, and I think it is not conveying history. It is like a parable. It is like a poem. It is conveying essential, true, absolutely fundamentally true things about God and creation, fundamentally true things about ourselves. The things we can learn in this passage about humanity is just essential to any Christian or Jewish worldview. And I think that is the purpose of Genesis 1 personally. And I think based on genre alone, there's many notable Hebrew scholars I could quote right now who would say that Genesis 1 is clearly of the genre of poetry. And there is a shift as we come to Genesis 2. The genre clearly shifts. It stops being as poetic. It stops being as structured. Still beautifully written, because Genesis is beautifully written, but the genre changes beginning from Genesis 2 into a far more historical narrative type structure. That's my current argument about Genesis 1 and my current viewpoint about Genesis 1.
After you just sort of explained that, I sit in the sort of the mixture of it's poetry and literature of the people at the time and their current understanding of needing to be able to explain how it works and how it's happened, but it just so happens to, on a scientific level, line up
very nicely.
Very nicely. So it's sort of like I have this understanding of probably more, it sits with more of a literature sense, but it's nice that science also can confirm it and sort of back it up. Before I say my next point, Morgan, after we sort of discussed that, your thoughts?
Yeah, where are you sitting after those three?
Yeah, I'm at a point where I just don't want to overthink it. Like, I just don't.
That's fair.
I don't want to question too much. I'm not really sure.
That's okay. And I think what you've just touched on is probably the main takeaway of, you know, like our brothers and sisters in Christ, no matter what your viewpoint, let's not overthink it. Let's not just get stuck on the squabble of needing to work out exactly what this is, where it sits, what our understanding of it is. Like, well, that's not the point. The point is of knowing that our God is the God of creation. And is and that is the point, that he is our sovereignty and the person that we look up to that has created all of this.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Christians get hung up fighting about Genesis 1 when ultimately we believe in Jesus. Jesus is the foundation of our faith. He's the perfecter of our faith. He is the one that we totally believe in, and we can disagree about Genesis 1, but also have some good, robust discussions about Genesis 1. Can I just run through a list of the key theological truths that I think Genesis 1 teaches? Because I think no matter what viewpoint you hold, Genesis 1 teaches us these things about God, and it is incredible. Here we go. God exists. Like, that is groundbreaking. Like, let's be real. That is actually groundbreaking. There is one God. God is creator. God is distinct from creation. So goodbye paganism. God is personal. If that's not foundational to Christianity, I don't know what else is. God creates with his word. God blesses. The created order is good. God had a goal in creation. The Sabbath is important. And mankind was created in God's image. Like, these ideas are revolutionary for the original receivers of this text. Like, if you are an ancient Jewish person and all you've ever heard is your Babylonian, Egyptian, or Canaanite friends talk about their creation stories, like these 11 points I just listed out are groundbreaking. And we get to read Genesis 1 in the 21st century and also affirm that this is the foundation of our faith, the foundation of all we believe, the origin of our faith, which is what Genesis means, is these truths. And that's where we all start from. That's what we all agree on.
100%. And I love what you said, like, Morgan, let's not overthink it. Let's you know, we believe on these truths. Let's not overthink it. God's given this book, this word, you know, for us. Let's not overthink it, and let's continue on in his word.